Me and my girlfriend were on our way to her parents' house. I was invited to Thanksgiving dinner with them, which was a huge honor for me since I'd only met her parents 3 times. I was also nervous since her grandparents and aunts and uncles would also be there, who'd I never met. We had a long trek from my house to her parents' house. It would be a good hour-long drive. About 45 minutes into the drive, we had to stop for gas. We pulled up into a literally dead Gulf station right off the highway, and I decided to fill up with premium ones to do my car a favor. Of course, it was much cheaper to pay with cash, so I went inside with my head down as I dug my hand inside my wallet, searching for a 10 and a 20. And when I pulled the bills out, I instinctively looked up and said, 30 on 2 plate. But I stopped mid-sentence. There was no one there. I looked for a bell on the counter, but there was none. I simply called out if anyone was there. There wasn't even a back door behind the counter that you would assume would lead to some kind of employees-only room. No, it was just completely empty. The only other door in this little gas station besides the entrance was the single bathroom, and that door was open, exposing the blackness from within the bathroom. I figured whoever was manning the cash register may have just gone outside for something. I walked back outside and shrugged my shoulders at my girlfriend out of confusion. I looked around for maybe a porta potty or an ice machine or something that could be distracting a potential cashier, but there was nothing. It was a relatively small little gas station with foliage surrounding it in almost all directions. I figured that maybe somebody could be behind the building, smoking a bogey or a doobie, so I went back there as a final attempt. Nope. Just a dumpster sitting under a dimly lit roof light. I figured I'd just pay credit at this point and turn back. But as I did, somebody from out in the woods called over to me in a kind of whispery yell. My heart skipped a beat when I heard this. Hey! Hey! I kept hearing it from the woods. I took out my phone and flipped on the flashlight, just to skim the outer tree line for anybody who could be hiding in there. As my now shaking hand rotated the phone slowly, the light momentarily revealed somebody from behind the tree. I took off back to my car and stepped on it out of there. My girlfriend was scared shitless just in reaction to my fear. I told her about the bizarre thing that just happened, and from that point on, she kept looking through the rear view mirrors to just make sure that we weren't being followed. We pulled up to the next gas station we could find, this time, one that actually had a cashier. I paid him $30 and began filling up. A van pulled up to the pump right behind mine, and a man wearing a cap stepped out, staring intently at me. I tried to act as if I didn't notice him, but when it got to the point where he was staring at me for at least 20 seconds straight, I had to look at him and ask him if there was a problem. He finally turned away. The second I was done, I hopped back in the car and took off once more. We made it to her parents' house safely, and I don't believe we were followed. Now, I wouldn't have shared this story if it weren't for the fact that a few weeks later, I did some research and found out that a 33-year-old Indian man who worked at the gas station we had stopped at had been murdered, and his body was stuffed in the woods behind the station. I immediately gave the police a tip about the guy who I saw at the station, who was surely caught on camera. The following year on Thanksgiving, a similar murder happened at another gas station. We have since named him the Thanksgiving Killer. I fear only the worst once more this year, as he has still not been caught. This happened when I was about 13 years old. I remember that year for Thanksgiving, we were going to be having it at our house. People were going to start coming over sometime in the afternoon, and my parents were up late preparing food the night before, and my sister and I were helping clean the house. We had a 2-story house, and all the bedrooms were upstairs, Downstairs was the main living room, the kitchen, dining room, and a few others. Our house was kind of big, so it was the perfect place to have a bunch of people over. I remember that before going to bed, my parents mentioned how they had to get up early to get more food ready for the day. After we all had gone to bed and the next morning came, I was woken up by my mom. She told me that both her and my dad were going to the store quickly to buy a couple of last-minute ingredients they hadn't realized that they were out of. I was really groggy from my sleep being interrupted. It must have been like 7 a.m. or so. I remember my mom saying that she just wanted to let me know and that they would be back soon, then she left. I instantly turned over and fell back asleep. Probably like 30 minutes later or so, my alarm went off and I woke up. I was a little bit more rested and awake now. I got out of bed and went into the hallway to use the bathroom. When I did, I noticed that my sister's bedroom door was open, and she didn't appear to be inside of it. I could sort of hear the TV playing downstairs, and I figured that she was already up. I used the bathroom and then went downstairs. It was clean, and the sunlight lit up most of the space. In the living room, the TV was playing and on a Thanksgiving Day parade. I looked around for my sister, but she was nowhere to be seen. I went into the kitchen, but she wasn't there either. I guess maybe she had gone with my parents to the store, and I returned to the living room towards the couch. Then, I heard a noise. It sounded like a whisper. I got really startled, and then I heard it again. It was my sister's voice, and it sounded like she was behind the couch. I looked behind the couch and saw her. She was all crouched up in almost a ball and looked terrified. She then whispered to me that there was a man in the house and told me to hide. I quickly went behind a sort of lazy boy chair that was next to the couch in the living room. I whispered to my sister, asking where the man was. She said she didn't know, but when she came downstairs, she saw a guy in the kitchen. Just then, we both heard a noise. It was coming from the hallway near the front door. I looked out from behind the chair I was hiding behind and saw a guy walking into the living room. He was tall and wore a black sweatshirt. He also had a hat on, but I didn't get a good look at his face. I quickly, but quietly, tried to move back behind the chair so that the guy couldn't see me. I heard him walking around the living room, and the footsteps got closer. They came within 15 feet of where my sister and I were hiding. I was terrified, and my heart felt like it was going to beat out of my chest. It's a good thing the TV was playing, otherwise I feel like the man would have definitely heard us. I heard him walk farther away, and seemingly into the kitchen. The kitchen was farther away from the front door. I felt like maybe my sister and I could get away if the man was in there. I whispered to my sister and told her to follow me. We counted to 3 and then got out and ran as fast and also as quietly as we could to the front door. The area that the man was in the kitchen was sort of blocked off from seeing us. We didn't look back to see if he heard or saw us. When we made it to the front door, I unlocked it and opened it as fast as I could. Then we both rushed out of the door and into the driveway. Right after we got outside, we saw our parents' car driving down the street and pulling in. It was a sight to see. We both ran out to them. They barely had a chance to get in the driveway and seemed really confused to see us running out of the house. We got inside the back seat of the car and told them about a guy being inside of our house. They ended up calling the police from the car as we sat in the driveway. We drove down the street a little ways because my sister didn't feel safe, even being in the driveway. The police showed up pretty quickly. When they did, they entered the house and emerged roughly 10 minutes later with the man. It was a huge relief to see that he was caught. Apparently, they found him hiding upstairs in my bedroom closet. The part of it that really freaked me out, I'm so glad I got up when I did. I guess when my parents left, they forgot to lock the door that led from the garage to the house, because the front door was locked when I went outside, and the door to the garage wasn't. But how the guy got inside our garage in the first place, we never really found out. It was Thanksgiving night. I was over at my parents' house for dinner since they were hosting this year. I got to see some cousins and uncles I hadn't seen in almost a year. We had a typical Thanksgiving gathering for our family. My parents cooked a big meal as usual. Before dinner, though, I got a long essay of a text from some unknown number. I won't share it because it contains a lot of personal revealing details, but it started with, "Hey Melissa, hope your Thanksgiving is going well." Then I quickly came to realize who it was that sent this text. It was this crazy stalker guy named Kevin, who I'd never even met before. We matched on a dating app and texted and snapped for a while, but we never met, as he gave me obsessive vibes, and when I politely rejected going on a date with him, saying I don't think we have much in common, he got even more obsessive and aggressive. He even threatened me one time when I posted a snap story of my friend and I getting drinks, because he thought I was on a date with a guy. That was when I blocked him on everything, Snapchat, Instagram, and his number, but the contact didn't stop there. I'd get random Instagram accounts with 0 followers attempting to follow me, and I'd block them each time. Same thing on Snapchat. I'd get random accounts adding me with different guys' names every time, and whenever I'd add them back out of curiosity, their snap scores were always 0. After reading the entire message, I was disgusted. He was gaslighting me and borderline threatening me. I replied, "If you keep contacting me, I will go to the police." I took so long to form a reply I was okay with that my grandma got annoyed and asked me to put my phone away. It was only out of sight and out of mind for maybe half an hour before I got another text from another random number. It was another essay. I didn't want to completely ruin my mood and be on my phone dealing with this when I was with family. I put my phone away and just tried to focus on being a part of the conversation. When family started to leave and things started to slow down, I checked the text, and it was disturbing. It was longer than the first one, and it was him berating me and insulting me the entire time, acting like the entitled narcissistic sociopath that he clearly is. When there was just a small amount of family left, I showed them the text, and they were appalled. My mom wanted me to go to the police the next day to report him for harassment, which I planned on doing. I soon left my parents' house to go home to my apartment. My apartment is the lower floor of a 2-family house. My friend Chelsea is my roommate in the apartment. I got home before her, and I went straight to my room to look for Christmas movies to watch. My phone started ringing, and it said unknown caller. I knew it was him. I denied it and silenced my phone. I put on some silly rom-com Christmas movie to fall asleep to. It was called Surviving Christmas. All that I remember about it is that it had James Gandolfini in it. It was late at night, so I didn't plan on making it through the movie. I was getting sleepy halfway through the movie when I heard walking from outside my room in the house. It was in the apartment, not from upstairs, so I assumed it was Chelsea getting home from her night with her family. The footsteps came straight to my door. Then someone attempted to open my door. I always lock my bedroom door at night, even though I trust Chelsea. It's just a natural habit I have. I paused the movie and listened as the doorknob turned a few more times before I yelled, "Chelsea?" Then it stopped. I heard quiet footsteps walking away from the door. I grabbed my phone, about to call Chelsea, when I saw a bunch of texts on my screen from a third random number. The most alarming one was the threat saying, "Good thing you made it obvious where you live." I tried calling Chelsea like 5 times, but she never picked up. I called my parents a bunch of times until my dad picked up. I whispered into the phone that I think that crazy stalker was in the house. My dad said to stay put. He was coming over right away. We lived 10 minutes away from each other, but he made it to me in 5. That's how fast he drove here. During that time, I stayed on the phone with my dad the whole time, until Chelsea called me back, and that's when she told me that she wasn't coming back to the apartment tonight, so it for sure was not her. When my dad got there, the front door was locked. I had to let him in. I swore to him that I wasn't imagining what happened, and so after we tore the place upside down, he went to the big sliding window by the kitchen, big enough that anyone could fit through, and he lifted it open. He turned to me and gave me a stare of disappointment. He scolded me after learning that I didn't lock the windows every night, and said, "Here's your answer on how someone got in here." I went back home with him and slept at home that night. First thing in the morning, my dad took me to the county court's office, where they gave us step-by-step instructions for getting a temporary restraining order. Skipping most of the legal process of this story, I eventually did see Kevin in person when I had to go to court to get the restraining order extended. The judge granted the extension, and though I could never prove that he broke into my apartment, his threatening texts were plenty, and if he ever contacts me again through any outlets, he'd be arrested. This was a truly dangerous man, and I hope he hasn't found anyone else to harass. I'm a 25-year-old guy. A few Thanksgivings back, when I was still in college, my family was hosting Thanksgiving at our house like we always did. Typically about 15 to 20 family members would come over to our house. Before dinner, we hung out, had football on the TV, and had some snacks out. My older sister had just recently got engaged to her now husband Mark, and I've always been a bit of an amateur photographer, so the 3 of us went outside to take some photos. It was a perfect day and time for photographs, because it had just begun to lightly snow, and the sun was sort of peeking out of the clouds. It honestly looked pretty cool. We went out to our backyard, which was fairly large. There were several acres of land back there, with a shed and a pretty big woods. We went to the entrance of the woods, which was kind of our family photo spot, and I began taking pictures of them. We went to several other places in the yard, and were outside for about 20 minutes, and then came back inside. We looked over the photos briefly, and then it was time for dinner, where we had turkey and potatoes and all that good stuff. A little later that night, when we were relaxing and watching some football, we decided to go over the photos again with a couple of my aunts to see. I have to admit that most of the photos were really good, but when we got to the ones in front of the woods, we noticed something. In 3 photos, in the window of the shed in the background, we could see what appeared to be a man's face looking at the camera. We completely missed this the first couple of times that we looked. It was a pretty creepy sight to see, and my sister couldn't believe it. We weren't able to make out much of the detail of the man's face because of how far away he was. We could only see his head in the window. We showed the pictures to my dad, who decided to go out to the shed with my 2 uncles. They were all pretty large men, and said they were confident they could take whoever it was. But we still didn't know who the man was, or if he was dangerous or not. We also didn't know if he would still be in the shed. Many of us watched from the window, as my dad and 2 uncles walked out of the house towards the shed. When they got there, they opened the door, and I saw all 3 of them go inside. Then, we saw a man briefly run out and try to hit one of my uncles, but was soon overpowered and shoved back into the shed. My dad and uncles then shut the door, and all stood in front of it to block it. They signaled to us that the man was still in fact inside, and yelled for us to call the police. while they held the door shut so the man couldn't escape. My aunt already had called the police, and about 5 minutes later, they showed up and arrested the man. He was a dirty-looking guy who for some reason wandered into our yard and decided to live in our shed for a whole 2 days. Needless to say, it made for a very memorable Thanksgiving.